the 2014 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you live from Georgia Public Broadcasting. The race for United States Senate.
Good evening. I'm Russ Spencer, anchor for Fox 5 News in Atlanta, and we'd like to welcome you and our live studio audience to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting here in Atlanta. This is the debate between the candidates for U.S. Senate, so let's meet the candidates right now. They are, in alphabetical order, Michelle Nunn, the former CEO and president of the Points of Light Foundation; David Perdue, the former CEO of Dollar General and Reebok; and Amanda Swafford is an attorney and former Flowery Branch councilwoman. Now let's meet our panelists. Christina Cassidy is a State House correspondent for the Associated Press. Charles Edwards is the assistant news director for 90.1 WABE. And Daniel Malloy is the Washington, D.C. correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This debate will consist of 3 rounds, and for more information on the rules, please visit atlantapressclub.org. Let's get started. In the first round, each panelist will pose a question to one candidate, and Daniel Malloy, you get the first question for David Perdue.
Mr. Perdue, you've said that the national debt and unfunded liabilities are the reason that you got into this race. 2 of the biggest drivers of that are Medicare and Social Security. What specifically would you do about these programs if elected? Would you raise the retirement age, or should we get the private sector more involved in these programs?
Well, thank you, Daniel. It is why I got in this race. This debt is unconscionable. We've almost doubled this debt under this president's administration. In the next 2 years, we will do that, even though he told us he would cut it in half. Right now, those unfunded liabilities, combined with our current debt, it's over $1 million per household. The solution is going to take a long time to solve this Social Security Medicare liability. The other one that's hanging out there is the interest on this debt. It goes up astronomically over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years as interest rates probably will rise. Look, we have to do a couple things with Social Security and Medicare. We have to protect the participants who are already drawing benefits for both those programs. We then have to look at the very beginnings of that program with people who are entering those programs for the first time, entering the workforce, and have a formula that will absolutely sustain itself over their lifetime of work, such that when they get to the point in time when they need those benefits, they will be able to support themselves.
Mr. Perdue, thank you. Charles Edwards, your turn to ask a question of Amanda Swafford.
Yes, Ms. Swafford, you are arguably the most important person in this race right now. I mean, a lot of people are focused on David Perdue and Michelle Nunn, but if the race is as close as they say it is, and it likely would go to a runoff, what would you tell Libertarian voters, what would you tell undecided voters of how to evaluate David Perdue and Michelle Nunn? I mean, obviously you run to win, but if there is a Perdue-Nunn runoff, what do you tell those voters about how to evaluate the two?
Well, I'm going to be looking at the candidates during the runoff, and I'm going to be looking at their respective parties during the runoff. And more importantly, I'm going to be looking at their private sector experience and the things that they've done while they've been serving in the private sector, and addressing and looking at those concerns during the runoff.
Well, to listen to your answer, it sounds like you think there's definitely going to be a runoff.
I believe that that's what polling is certainly telling us, that there's going to be a runoff, and I remain optimistic that Georgia will take a stance to understand that the power and responsibility to change the way we've been doing government lies in their hands.
All right, thank you very much. Christina Cassidy, your turn to ask Michelle Nunn a question.
Good evening. You played an integral role during the merger of Hands-On and Points of Light, which resulted in at least 90 people losing their jobs, saying in an interview that the losses were necessary to have the strength and success of today. One of your major attacks on Mr. Perdue has been the loss of jobs shipped overseas during his career. What obligation does corporate America have to its workers?
Thank you, Christina, and thank you to Amanda and David, to Russ, to our panelists. It's great to be here. I believe that we have a duty to try and be good stewards of the organizations that we run. Every organization that I've ever run, I've left stronger and more vital than when I took it over. And sometimes you do have to make tough choices, but you do it with the intent of ensuring that you're being the best steward for the highest impact of that organization and of the employees that work there. I was fortunate fortunate enough to be able to be at the helm of Points of Light, and we were able to really ensure that we created what's now the largest volunteer organization dedicated to service in the world. And I'm very proud of that record. You know, I compare that to David Perdue's record. He said that, from his own words, that he spent the majority of his career outsourcing jobs. And, you know, I just question whether that's the criteria that we want in the person who is running for Senate. He also, when he was head of Dollar General, there was over 2,000 women that were not paid equitably. So we do have a real contrast in our records.
Mr. Perdue, you have 30 seconds.
Well, thank you. First of all, you know, this is, again, a desperate attempt to distract people away from the truth with misfacts and misstatements. You know, I'm proud of my record at Dollar General. We created tens of thousands of jobs throughout my career, and at Dollar General alone, we created almost 20,000 jobs, 2,500 stores. And I worked hard to help people make from payday to payday. The problem we have right now is that this government is still decimating entire industries and causing us to lose jobs. That's why I want to go to the Senate. I want to be a champion for jobs in the United States Senate, not a rubber stamp for Barack Obama.
That seemed to be directed at you. Would you like a try at that? I mean, that has been something that's been said over and over again in ads, that you would be a rubber stamp for President Obama.
I believe that's not the first time that you'll hear that, or the last time. And I think that, you know, this is, again, I think moving David from the actual record, which is what we were talking about, your record of shipping jobs overseas. And so, you know, when I think about this race, I think about a real contrast that we have. And it is between someone who spent their life right here in Georgia for 26 years, mobilizing volunteers and building communities, and someone who, by their own words, has spent their career, majority of it, outsourcing jobs.
All right, I'll give you one last chance to respond to that.
Well,
I'm sure
thank you.
we'll
Again, here we go again. I mean, these are not based on facts. None of those allegations are based on facts. Again, I've created and saved tens of thousands of jobs throughout my career. I want to go to Washington and fight for the jobs of Georgians right here in Georgia who are having a hard time making it from payday to payday. A lot of people who have the jobs are worried about the jobs, and people who don't have the jobs are having trouble finding the job. What we've got to do is get bad government policies out of the way. Overregulation, too much tax, and get the energy released finally to get this economy going.
All right, thank you. That concludes the first round. The candidates will now have an opportunity to ask one question to both of their opponents. Each will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal if necessary. Ms. Swafford, you go first. Your question for Michelle Nunn.
Yes, Ms. Nunn. Last week, the Democrat Party released some flyers that highlighted the Ferguson issue and encouraged black individuals to go out and vote, and you said that in response to that we needed to have a conversation about that. I'd like to know whether you support or condone those use of those flyers here in Georgia to encourage blacks to go out and vote in this race.
Well, I said we do need a conversation, and I think that when I reflect upon Ferguson, I think about it from the mother's perspective. You think about Michael Brown, someone who was just a few days away from going to college, and I think you think about what is our responsibility as a community, as a democracy, to make sure that all of our young people are cultivated and supported and treated equally under the law. So I do think that it merits a conversation. I also think that it gives us an opportunity to talk about what kind of society we want, the kind of society where everybody has a voice, where everybody lifts up that voice and makes it known in the voting booth. And I think it's incredibly important that we urge, encourage, and inspire people. And I've spent a good bit of the last 15 months talking about how we need to make sure that people realize that they can make a real change through elections and that their vote matters for the kind of community and the kind of democracy that we have.
Ms. Swafford, your question now for David Perdue.
Can I get a rebuttal on that? Because I'm not exactly sure that answers my question.
Okay, well, go ahead. You have an opportunity to rebut, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure whether you're still supporting or opposing the use of those flyers. That addresses the conversational aspect, but are you supporting the use of those flyers or disapproving of the use of those flyers in this race to encourage black individuals to go and vote for the Democrat candidate?
So what I'm focused on is getting as many people out as possible to vote. I spent this morning at church with John Lewis, and John Lewis talked about the fact that, again, we need to make sure that we are urging everybody to use this right that is so precious, and that we need to be responsible to those that have gone before us, and we need to recognize that we, all of us, have an opportunity to make a difference through our vote.
All right, we'll leave that there. Ms. Swafford, now your question for David Perdue.
My question for Mr. Perdue deals with the First Amendment right and the internet and citizen journalism. And in particular, we've got Dianne Feinstein, who's looking to regulate internet bloggers and license them. And we have a situation that happened in North Georgia, at a pumpkin patch up in North Georgia, where we had an individual citizen blogger that was removed from that political event that you attended. And in terms of First Amendment, we haven't really heard anything from you in terms of how you handled that situation. If we send you to Washington as a senator, how are you going to handle our First Amendment issues as it relates to citizen journalists and
That's it for the question. Thank you.
Things?
Well, thank you. We have such great rights and privileges in this country. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, all over the amendments, but the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. I am absolutely going to stand up for our Constitution. I believe our president right now is abashing it. I believe the First Amendment is under great threat. You saw the Democrats in the Senate actually threaten to pass a law about that just a few weeks ago. In my opinion, our great liberties are in jeopardy. If you look at the foundations of what the Republican Party stands for, and indeed I think America, economic opportunity, limited government, fiscal responsibility, and individual liberty. The values I have right now, I got in Middle Georgia. I will take to Washington to defend those values and fight for our Constitution and our First Amendment.
You have 30 seconds to rebut, Ms. Swafford, if you'd like it.
But in terms of the citizen journalist that was there,
Not to ask another question. You have 30 seconds to respond.
To respond to the rebuttal on that, to the question on that. In terms of our First Amendment, the FEC is trying to regulate citizen journalists and First Amendment issues. To those lines, are you going to stand up for the First Amendment in a more substantial way than we saw you stand up for them at the event in North Georgia?
I'm sorry. We're going to stop it right there because each of you gets one question for each other. Mr. Perdue, it's your chance to ask a question to Michelle Nunn. Thank you.
Well, Michelle, delighted to be here with you again. President Obama last week said that he's not on the ballot, but his policies are, every single one of them. Now, as you support Obamacare, Common Core, higher taxes, amnesty, and the economic policies that have failed and have actually generated more people out of work right now than any time since Jimmy Carter was in president, isn't a vote for you just a vote for Barack Obama?
David, I was with a farmer recently, and he said to me, you need to tell David Perdue that if he'd wanted to run against Harry Reid, he should have moved to Nevada. And if he'd wanted to run against the president, he should have run for president. So you know that we are on the ballot here, and I have said that there are lots of things that I agree with the president on and lots of things that I disagree with the president on. And let me tell you about a few of those things that I disagree with the president on. I believe it should have moved forward already with the Keystone Pipeline. I believe that he has made and his administration have made irresponsible cuts to our military. I also believe that the president should have done more to work with Congress and to address our long-term debt. But I do think that we should move forward with the minimum wage, pay equity legislation, bipartisan immigration reform. So I, unlike what you characterized here, I do not agree with the president as some sort of a rubber stamp. I have said very clearly that I'm going to be an independent voice for Georgia, and I will work with whoever the president is, Republican or Democrat, to do what's best for Georgians.
Well, it's very interesting. That's not what the president's saying. He was on the radio last week saying that he really urged the people of Georgia to get you elected so you can go to Washington and help him continue his good works. But it seems to me that if you want to help the military, you would stand up for our veterans instead of saying that you would defer to the president after the failure of the Veterans Administration. And to talk about farmers after you rated farmer issues number 18 on your list of priorities is hypocrisy.
All right, Mr. Perdue, you have a chance now to ask Amanda Swafford a question.
Well, Ms. Swafford, glad to be here with you. Big government policies are decimating entire industries right now, hurting small businesses from creating jobs. Obamacare alone is keeping almost 2/3 of small businesses from hiring people and have actually encouraged them to cut back employment. Do you agree with me that more government means less freedom and opportunity for hardworking Georgians?
Well, absolutely. Yes, the more government we have, the less opportunity we have for individuals to engage and enter into our free market enterprise system. So absolutely. The less opportunity we have for individuals to become engaged in our enterprise system, the less opportunities we have for everyone to be involved in. So absolutely. Big government solution is not a solution. And I have absolutely stood as a councilwoman in local government voting against big government solutions. And I have a record of doing that. I don't want to rearrange big government. I don't want to make big government more efficient. At its core, I don't think big government works. And everything that big government tries to do, it never really does very well at all. And that's all we've gotten out of the leadership in Congress. They never give us a government program that works, and they never give us anything that gives us back more of our freedoms that we deserve so much in this country. That's the purpose of the federal government, to give us the rights that we deserve.
You have 30 seconds to rebut if you need to.
Thank you, Amanda. We definitely need a new direction in our country. Big government is stifling entrepreneurialism and the growth of small businesses. So regardless of your party, if you believe, like I do, in economic opportunity, individual liberty, economic freedom, and limited government, then I hope you'll stand with me and help us take our country back.
Ms. Nunn, your turn to ask a question of David Perdue, please.
So, David, in 1992, you moved to Asia to head up Sara Lee's operations. You said that you built it from the ground up there. Shortly thereafter, 500 people here in Georgia lost their jobs. You've said that people who question the outsourcing career that you have just don't understand business. So could you tell us and the people who lost their jobs in places like Cartersville and Calhoun and Milledgeville just a little bit more about business?
Well, first of all, here we go again, misstating the facts. I went to Asia with Sara Lee to open Asia for all of their divisions to help sell product over there. It was a global organization in most countries of the world. There was no connection to any jobs, any connection to any companies here in Georgia. That was an entirely different division, had nothing to do with what we were doing in Asia, and my opponent knows that. But here's the real problem. This is all a sleight of hand. It's a distraction. This is why I got in this race. This is what's wrong with politics. We get this every time we have a race, distraction away from the truth. Here's the truth. This president's failed policies are hurting men and women in Georgia, and you know that. You haven't said one thing what you would do to create jobs. Let me ask you a question. Do you own an iPhone? If you own an iPhone, did you outsource jobs? Do you have an Apple computer? Did you outsource jobs? In my career, I created and saved thousands of jobs. I want to go to Washington and be a champion for the working people of this state to create jobs and have prosperity for their kids and grandkids.
30 seconds, Ms. Nunn, to respond to that.
So, David, the facts are very clear, and they are in a deposition under oath. You said that you spent the majority of your career outsourcing. There were 16 different countries that were listed where you'd created jobs: India and Pakistan, China. And whether it's with Gitano or Sara Lee or Haggart, you do have a pattern here of outsourcing jobs. So I think that's just the question of you've run on a business career, and so people deserve to know what that business career involves. And I do have a 8-point plan, by the way, around job creation, and I'm the only one in the race that does.
Mr. Perdue.
That sounds like Barack Obama's 10-point plan that's failed miserably. Let me just say this. At Dollar General, we created tens and 20,000, almost 20,000 jobs in about 4 years. And yet we outsourced every single product that we sold in our stores, almost all of them in the United States. I am proud of the fact that we helped our customers get from payday to payday and provided great opportunities for our folks to provide for their families every day.
Let's move on, Ms. Nunn, to your question for Amanda Swafford, please.
So, Amanda, I got into this race because I believe that we need to change and fight the gridlock and the dysfunction in Washington. I've talked about a variety of ways of doing that, including really mandating that our Congress people don't get paid unless they pass an annual budget, or that congressmen are precluded from going on to become lobbyists. Can you share some of your ideas for what we need to do to fight the gridlock in Washington?
Well, one of the things we can do is start looking at individuals for individuals and not become so ingrained in the entrenched party system. I think that's one of the most important things we can do, certainly. Another important thing that we can certainly do is understanding that government's not always the answer to the problems that we have. And it's to become more self-reliant and get back to first asking the question, what can we do? As through the private sector, but as individuals too, and not always looking to government to solve every problem that we have. I think that's a paramount difference that we need to try to get back to and bring back more of the responsibility that individuals have had for so long. And that's the original part of our founding fathers really believed in the paramount of the individual.
You have 30 seconds to respond if you'd like.
I believe ultimately that the way that we fight gridlock and dysfunction is to send people to Washington who are willing to work across party lines, who believe that there can be good ideas on both sides of the aisle. David, throughout this race, has talked about, the fact that he actually, last debate, said that he was bored by all of my bipartisan conversation. And he said that he couldn't think of a single Democratic idea that he could work together on. And I think that that's, I think ultimately that we have someone here who has said that he wants to perpetuate the gridlock that already exists.
All right, what do you have to say to that?
Well, Michelle, again, the hypocrisy abounds. The source of gridlock is not Republicans in Congress. It's Harry Reid. There are over 300 bills on his desk right now that have been passed in the House, waiting for his approval, waiting for him to move it onto the floor. When I look at the direction of this country, I'm very concerned because this political doublespeak does not move us forward. It doesn't create one single job. It doesn't answer one question that the people of Georgia are asking right now, and that's when are we going to get government working again?
Well, he's accusing you of political doublespeak. I'll give you a shot at that.
Well, again, I believe that until you send people, Republicans that say they're going to work together, which you have failed to say, or Democrats, that we are going to have the continued gridlock. I just don't believe that it's one party or the other. I think it has to be both sides coming together. And I think we do have a very clear contrast in terms of how we see breaking through that dysfunction. I don't think it's about prosecuting the other party. I think it is about problem solving.
One last go on this.
Well, I disagree. I think it is. When you have a failed presidency, you have to prosecute it because we deserve better than we're getting right now. The problem is when we look at the direction of this country, we've got to make a hard right-hand turn. The direction of this country is failing. I'll work with anybody that'll help us turn this country back to its founding principles, get our people working again, have a secure national border, and secure our national security around the world and have a consistent foreign policy. I've said all along, I'll work with anybody that'll help me do that.
All right. Thank you to all three of you. If you're just joining us now, this is the debate between the candidates for U.S. Senate. We will now go to our third and final round. And in this round, I'm going to ask a question submitted by the public and then turn it over to our panelists for their questions. We'll continue this cycle until we run out of time tonight. Our first constituent question comes from Kathleen Martin. Thank you for sending it in, Kathleen. She's a great-grandmother from Covington, and she would like to know, can they say something good about their opponent? Michelle Nunn, I'll let you start.
Sure. Well, first of all, Amanda, I am grateful for your courage in joining the race and for standing by your ideals and values, and have a lot of admiration for that. And I know that you're doing it while you're continuing to work, and how much hard work that is. David, also for your commitment to public service. I think we all owe a debt of gratitude to those who are willing to be in the arena. David, we also share Houston County and a variety of different family relationships and family. I know you're proud of your family, as I am of mine. And somebody recently told me something that I didn't know about you, which is that you have a very good golf game.
Mr. Perdue.
Her dad's lying again. Amanda, I respect you so much. Standing up for liberty and the individual, I respect that, and we need more of that in America. I think both parties have to pay attention to that right now. I respect that you're working while you're trying to do this. This is a hard game, and I respect that. Michelle, I respect you're a working mother. I really do. You have a great family that anybody would pray for. I love your heart. I love your brain. I love your family. We just disagree on the policies, but I really like what you've done in your career, and I respect you for that.
Amanda?
Absolutely. Mr. Perdue, you have a wonderful team working for you. I know many of the individuals that are working on your team, and you have a very solid team working for you, and I respect a lot of the individuals that are working for you, and you've organized a very well team, a great team working for you. And Ms. Nunn, it's wonderful to be sharing the stage as a woman nominated for Senate here in Georgia, running in that platform, and that's a great thing, I think, to be able to share the stage with you as one of only 3 women that have ever been nominated by parties in the state of Georgia.
Thanks to all 3 of you. Charles Edwards, your turn to ask a question.
My question here is for Mr. Perdue and for Ms. Nunn here. I mean, we just spent a whole lot of time listening, talking about outsourcing and jobs and the economy, the back and forth that you guys had there. If I'm at home watching this right now and I don't have a job, or if I'm at home watching this right now and I'm running a business, what realistically, given the next Senate term, can be done to make the economic climate so that businesses can do what they need to do to thrive and people can get jobs so that the unemployment rate goes down? What realistically can be done in the U.S. Senate? And we'll start with Mr. Perdue.
Well, thank you, Charles. I think that's the seminal question of this election, frankly. You know, I've said all along, even though Michelle says that I haven't been talking about this, long before she had an opponent, I think, last year, we were talking about how to get the economy going. It's very simple. There are many things you can do, but there are 3 priorities. One, you've got to cut this spending, and you've got to solve the tax problem. You know, we're creating an unlevel playing field around the world with our tax system. We are the only country that has a repatriation tax. It's not a partisan issue. She says, I will not work with anybody. This is a nonpartisan issue I believe I can lead to get that done. The second thing is I really believe we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, and that creates an unlevel playing field with the rest of the world. The second thing is we're over-regulated right now, and we're overtaxed. If we pull back these regulators, small businesses will take off. And the third is we finally have to unlock our energy resources to fulfill our mission to provide a better life for our kids and grandkids.
Ms. Nunn?
Well, we actually agree on some of those things. I do believe that we need to make sure that we're alleviating regulatory burdens on small businesses. I believe that we also need to make sure that we are reforming our tax code. I think we need to reduce our corporate tax rate and incent both innovation but also investment right here at home. I think we need to continue to invest in infrastructure, which we know is such an important part of economic development. But I also think that we need to raise the minimum wage. I think it's one of the things that we need to do. And when people are looking at what we can do in Congress, it is to make sure that everybody who's working has the capacity to be self-sufficient. I think this is a place where David and I disagree. I asked David at the last debate about whether he believed that we should raise the federal minimum wage. He does not. But I asked him, do you actually think there should be a federal minimum wage, and at what rate do you think it should be?
Mr. Perdue, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Here again, this is a perfect example of what happens when somebody who's never really been in business tries to start asking questions and answering questions about how do you grow jobs. She went right away to the minimum wage. That's a political expedient that comes around every 4 years, every 2 years. Right now, I want her to answer the question, if you raise the minimum wage 40%, which person out of every 3 people who are working right now would you tell are going to lose a job? That's the last thing we need to do when we are trying to get this economy going.
David, we just disagree about the economics of this, and it doesn't mean that I don't understand business. You've told the citizens of Georgia when they question your outsourcing career that they don't understand business, but we do understand business, and I actually do understand what it means to raise the minimum wage. I know that in states right now where they have raised the minimum wage, they actually have greater economic growth and greater jobs than Georgia. Georgia has right now, as you well know, the highest unemployment rate in the nation, and so we do know a thing or two, those of us who disagree, about business.
Christina Cassidy, your turn to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. On the topic of the corporate tax rate, Ms. Nunn and Mr. Perdue, you've both said that a lower tax rate is needed to make companies more competitive with the rest of the world. Ms. Swafford, you've called to eliminate it. That would no doubt result in less revenue. So my question is what would you cut in order to make a lower corporate tax rate possible? For all of you.
Ms. Swafford,
who's going first?
Who do you want to ask that to?
For all the candidates.
Okay.
But we can start with Ms. Swafford.
So the question is, what would I cut to make the corporate income tax down to 0 work? I don't think we have to actually to make the corporate income tax work, that's part of the fair tax, which is a program that has a lot of widespread support and has a lot of research behind it. It is a program that shifts the taxation down to a consumption-based tax. And with that, it does eliminate the corporate income tax and goes to a national sales tax of sorts. And that's a strong program that I've been involved with on a grassroots level for a very long time, working to go in that direction. But I, believe certainly that we could look to go even stronger than that and do away with all federal income taxes and get back to a system that our founding fathers actually envisioned of having the states apportion the income taxes or the tax system so that the taxes are apportioned based on population according to the states, and repealing the 17th Amendment and getting back to more direct representation for taxation.
All right, let's go down the line. Mr. Perdue, what would you cut?
Well, Christina, it's a great question. It's one of the ways we have gridlock in Washington, actually, is that every time we talk about reducing or increasing tax, one side said to solve the debt crisis, they want to increase tax. The other side, they want spending cuts. That's a unilateral debate, and I don't think it's the right one. I think the real debate is how do we get the economy going to solve this? The corporate tax rate creates an unlevel playing field with the rest of the world, as does the repatriation tax. There are over $2 trillion stuck in foreign banks, trapped over there, that if you change the repatriation tax, those roll back into the economy and create jobs. If you bring that corporate tax rate down to zero or some nominal number, there are studies out there that actually say because of the economic growth, it offsets itself. We only generate about 21 days of expenditures of the federal government from the corporate tax rate. I really believe that economic growth is the way out of the problem on corporate tax rate, create a level playing field around the world to create more jobs here at home.
Ms. Nunn?
I agree that by cutting the corporate tax rate, we actually will incent investment and create economic growth and opportunity here in our own country. And I think it's the right thing to do. And I think it's an example of where Democrats and Republicans could work together. I do differ with David and Amanda about the fair tax. The fair tax would mean 30% plus tax on things like your groceries, milk, everything. It would also mean that 50%, more than 50% of Georgians would end up paying $4,000 more in taxes. And now people at the very top, at the top 1%, would be paying less, $200,000 estimated less. But I just don't think that's the right way to go. I think that we need revenue neutral tax reform, but I think that the so-called fair tax is actually just not fair to the majority of Georgians.
Daniel, your turn to ask a question.
One of the first decisions you're going to have to make if you're elected to the U.S. Senate is who's going to be your party's leader. Ms. Nunn, would you vote for Harry Reid? And Mr. Perdue, would you vote for Mitch McConnell? And Ms. Swafford, who would you vote for?
I have said that I will vote for the Democrat that I think will best serve the interests of combating gridlock and getting things done, and in the best interest of Georgia. I really do believe that we need to hold leadership accountable. I think that Washington has been dysfunctional, and that the leadership there needs to continue to change if we're going to get something done. I also believe that nothing will really get done in the Senate until we have people on both sides of the aisle that are going to work together. Neither party is going to approach 60 votes, no matter who controls the Senate, whether it's Mitch McConnell or whether it's Harry Reid. And so until we have a center in the Senate, until we have enough people that say that they are going to work with a spirit of moderation, pragmatism, common sense, and putting Georgia first above party, I think that we will continue to have the same gridlock that we have today.
Mr. Perdue?
This is the same bill of goods we were sold in 2008 and 2012 by President Obama, when he said, I'll bring you all together. I'll work with the other party in a bipartisan way. And oh, by the way, I'll cut the debt in half. He's not done anything on all of those. My point right now is the Democrats are blaming Republicans in the House, and they keep talking about bringing civility to Washington, and we'll work across the aisle. Not one Democrat voted against in the Senate, voted against Obamacare. Not one Republican voted for it. Harry Reid right now has over 300 bills, as I said, stuck on his desk, and he won't let them go to debate in the Senate. To me, that is a single source of gridlock in Washington. Why is he doing that? Because I think it allows the president to run this country without Congress through executive order and regulatory mandate. The best example is the EPA. EPA is killing jobs right now, and it needs to be pulled back.
Ms. Swafford.
I'm not voting for any of the existing leadership in Congress because they are all doing a dismal job. Absolutely dismal job. And I'm not hanging out and visiting with any of the leadership right now in Congress. I haven't talked to any of them. I'm not friends with any of them. And I don't know who any of them are. I haven't had a personal relationship with them. I'm not supporting any of them right now. So I won't be supporting or voting for any of them. A lot can happen between now and when the Senate begins in session. So we have to wait and see who actually is going to be controlling the Senate. It really makes no difference who controls the Senate. All we know is that both parties have controlled us for decades. And ultimately, that's what your vote comes down to, is who you want to be in control of your life and who you want to be making the decisions for you. Do you want to turn to big government every time there's a crisis, every time there's something that needs to be solved? Is big government the answer? Or is the power and responsibility going to lie with you, the individual? That's the question in this election.
All right, Ms. Swafford, thanks very much. Now, I solicited input from the public in preparing for all of this, and the thing I heard over and over again is how disappointed people are with the tone and the content of the campaign advertising. I mean, if you look at yours, Mr. Perdue, she doesn't have her own mind, can't wait to rubber stamp President Obama. And Ms. Nunn, yours seem to suggest he's a rich guy who can't wait to send all the jobs overseas. I wonder, and people at home wonder, if you're disappointed and maybe even a little embarrassed by the half-truths that are part of this process. Mr. Perdue, why don't you begin?
Oh, absolutely. Been a business guy all my life. This is a terrible process. And I actually don't think it generates the best outcome. Big money, the drive to get reelected, that's one of the problems we have in Washington. I have fought all along over the last year to bring term limits to the discussion. And I'm dedicated to do that. If I go to Washington, I'm going to fight for term limits. I believe we have a broken system. Most people that I talk to in Georgia believe we have a broken system. But they're very disappointed with the divisive and just dividing and just divisive and arrogant nature of some of these ads. It doesn't move it to the dialogue, to the conversation about how do we move forward. I've offered up real hard solutions to some of the problems, like creating jobs by growing our economy, cutting our expenses. We have $480 billion of redundant agencies that we need to get after and cut. But yes, I think the process is a lousy process.
Ms. Nunn?
Well, I actually had a suggestion to change the process. I challenged David to keep the outside money from Georgia. Let's do something different in Georgia. But within a few hours, David, you said, no, we're not going to do that. And I think, we do see millions and millions of dollars coming in for negative advertising. I've also said we need campaign finance reform. We at least need transparency when groups come in and spend, again, millions of dollars without even us knowing who they are. So, I do want to point out that the winner of the most egregious ad of the campaign, not just in Georgia, but in the entire United States of America, has been given to you, David, for saying that President George H.W. Bush's Points of Light organization has given money to terrorists. And that ad was called Pants on Fire Lie, not only by the AJC, but by Time Magazine and by the New York Times and by USA Today, and in the Hall of Fame of Pants on Fire.
Okay, well, let's hash this out, because this is what people have seen at home. And she's correct in the sense that people who've judged this who aren't part of your campaign say that it was misleading. It was what was in her campaign memo was not how it's presented in the advertising.
Well, of course it is. It's right in the memo. Of course it is. That's exactly what was in the memo. But here's the other part of what you're not getting straight. Michael Bloomberg just put $350,000 into your PAC to come into Georgia to fight against our Second Amendment rights. You've got millions of dollars given to you by outside liberal parties who want to come in here and steal this election. When I look at this race, the outcome is too important for our country, the direction of our country, for our kids and grandkids, for us to sit in here and bicker about ads. I want to talk about how to get Georgians working again, how to get our military treated right, how to get our veterans treated right, and how to have a foreign policy that provides national security so we're not sitting around worried about Ebola and ISIS. And we have a president who's leading us from the front with a direction that we can all believe in. Right now, Congress is totally dysfunctional. I agree with that. That's why I got in this race. I think I can make a difference. With only 10 people in the U.S. Senate who have any business experience, I think I can add to the dialogue about how to create jobs. Who do you want helping that dialogue? Somebody that's been there and done it, or somebody who talks about it theoretically?
Ms. Nunn, one more time, if you'd like.
Well, again, I think, David, your experience would be unique. You'd be the only one in the Senate that has said that they spent the majority of their career outsourcing jobs. But let's talk about, I mean, again, there's no excuse for running an ad that has been called shameful and a despicable lie. And no matter what the rationale is, you really can't justify that. And yes, let's talk about veterans and farmers. And by the way, I've spent much of my career supporting veterans. I've spent a good part of this campaign talking about farmers. So your misrepresentation about those issues, again, I'm the only one that actually has a campaign set of issues that talks about veterans and farmers. There's nowhere in your entire website of campaign issues where you address farmers or veterans. So let's do have a dialogue, but let's be clear about who's won the Hall of Fame ad in terms of negativity and in terms of what's been called an outright and shameful lie by Neil Bush.
We did have a chance to respond to that. So, Charles, I'm going to have you ask a question next.
Yeah, and I want to do some piggybacking here. I want to piggyback on your question, Russ, and also your question, Daniel, because you asked about ads and how people are frustrated with the ads. And you said, David Perdue, we shouldn't focus on the ads. But one of your ads does talk about how you think Michelle Nunn is a rubber stamp. And that's something that you talked about earlier in the debate. But in her answer, she has talked about there are things I agree with the president on, there are things I disagree with the president on. So I'm just trying to understand how you can continue to call her a rubber stamp if she's giving you sort of both things here. And I also have a question for Michelle Nunn here. Daniel asked you about, would you support Harry Reid? And you talked about what you want to see in a Senate majority leader or someone who's leading the Democrats or leading the Senate. And it's good to hear you talk about the sort of the characteristics you want there. But right now it is Harry Reid. And that's who people see in terms of agenda. So do you see Harry Reid as somebody who has those characteristics? Is that somebody that you would vote for? And I guess we can start with David Perdue talking about, the ads there.
Thank you, Charles. Well, Barack Obama handpicked Michelle. He recruited her. He's funded her. Do you really think she's going to bite the hand that feeds her? I mean, she's raised millions of dollars through his network. She's brought advisors in here. He even hired one of her political advisors to be the czar for Ebola, who has no medical background whatsoever. I mean, she's had Michelle Obama in town, she's had Hillary in town, Bill Clinton's been in town. It just seems to me that we need an outsider to go there and really affect change. We keep talking about gridlock, but we really don't look at the cause of gridlock, and that's is Harry Reid blocking those bills allows this president to do immeasurable damage to our economy right now. In the next 2 years, God only knows how many federal judges are going to be appointed, and we may have 1 or 2 Supreme Court justices named in that period of time. I think the people of Georgia need to be very serious about naming the next U.S. Senator from all those perspectives.
Ms. Nunn, can you give us a yes or no about Harry Reid?
Well, look, can I answer this? Sure. Nobody has been feeding me by hand, David. And let me just clarify, I've probably spent maybe 45 minutes of my life with President Obama. I spent 7 years running President George H.W. Bush's Points of Light organization. I spent 47 years with my father as an advisor and someone who deeply understands that bipartisanship and that statesmanship and that working together across party lines is at the very heart of getting something done. So again, the accusations of rubber stamp are just completely distortions. Happy to go to the question.
Yeah.
So you all know that when you cast your vote in the Senate, you have to figure out who actually is going to be represented. Right now, I will tell you that I think that there are real reasons to say to Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell that we need to do something different, that we need to actually reshape the nature of our political discourse and the culture in Washington. And I would actually say that. I have told Harry Reid no already. I'll tell you, when I started this race, Harry Reid encouraged someone else to run. He asked me not to run. And I said, with all due respect, I'm going to be the one that makes that decision along with the people of Georgia. So I know how to say no to Senator Reid, and I also will work together with those when possible. Again, that contrast to David, who has said that he wouldn't vote for Mitch McConnell, but he went right up there right after he got the nomination and said he was going to be a team player for Senator McConnell and for the Republican Party. And I'm going to be a team player for Georgia.
Can we get a quick rebuttal from you on that?
Well, yeah, I want to go back to one thing that's been said 3 times tonight that is a misquote, and I want to get the record cleared up. In that deposition, if you'll go read that deposition, Michelle, and you know this, it never says, I outsourced jobs, not one time. And she's repeated that 3 times tonight. That's the same kind of bill of goods that we got from Obama in 08 and 12. That's the sleight of hand we're getting in this race. And that's why I got in this race. I want to clean that up when we get to Washington.
So the distinction being that you're not moving jobs overseas, you're simply creating jobs, sourcing overseas. Is that what you're saying?
Well, Dollar General is a perfect example. We created 20,000 jobs in about 4 years. And yet we outsourced all the product we sold in our stores. This is the part of the conversation that never gets out. The part of the conversation that I outsource jobs, they know that's not right. They know it's not in the deposition, and yet that's still a lie. The second thing is where George H.W. Bush, the implication is that he's endorsed her. He actually endorsed us, and he's actually asked her to take his image down and to stop using his name. But she, in disrespect, does not do that.
Ms. Nunn, is the criticism not a little unfair in that most major corporations do outsourcing of some form or fashion, including the one, Southwire, that you chose to criticize him in one of your ads?
I think it's very clear if you read the deposition that, David, you've spent a career, you've lived in 8 different countries, you've listed 16 different countries where you created jobs. You weren't talking about creating jobs in Hiawassee, or you were talking about creating jobs in India and Pakistan and Mexico. And as you say, that is a part of the American free enterprise system, absolutely. I just don't think it's the criteria that people are looking for when they are electing their senator to Washington.
Christina Cassidy.
Ms. Nunn, Mr. Perdue just a moment ago brought up former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, a prominent gun control advocate who has given generously to a political action committee supporting your campaign. Do you support Mr. Bloomberg's efforts on gun control, and would you support Senator Feinstein's most recent version of an assault weapons ban?
So I believe, and have talked about this throughout the campaign and the Second Amendment, I believe that every law-abiding citizen should have access to guns. And I have parents and grandparents and now a son who are hunters and gun owners. But I do believe in common sense measures that have been put forward by folks like Senator Manchin and Senator Toomey, both NRA-supported bipartisan legislation that would put forward universal background checks to ensure that criminals, terrorists, and those who are mentally unstable do not have access to guns. I do not support any other form of legislation around guns right now.
Daniel Malloy.
Mr. Perdue, one of the attacks that Democrats have been throwing at you lately has to do with the notion that you want to get rid of the Department of Education. Do you?
You know, my mother gets a real laugh at that. She's 88. She's a retired school teacher. My mom and dad were school teachers. You know, my philosophy is this, and I've been involved in education since my early working career. One of my first jobs was in a Head Start program, teaching kids to read. The problem we have in the last 40 years is that we pushed billions of dollars to the federal government, and the results have gotten actually much worse. 1 out of 3 kids approximately aren't getting out of high school. Our 14-year-olds are right in the middle of the pack of the top 39 countries in the world in terms of math and science. By any measure, our federal controlled education system is not serving our children. It's getting in the way of our good teachers with the bureaucratic compliance requirements that it puts on top of them. What I've said all along is the best decisions for education are made at the local level between the parent, the teacher, and the local administrations. My mother has taught me since I was 6 years old, the best decisions are made right there at the local level. And that's what I've fought for, and that's what I'll go to Washington to fight for.
So get rid of the department?
Oh, I never said get rid of the department. I said if you look at it like you would in business, you would look at the results and you say, we're not getting results out of those expenditures. Instead of sequestration across the board, what I would have looked at is in there and said, okay, what are we not getting in terms of results, and where would that money be better spent? It'd be much better spent at the local level, giving people choice and giving those parents control of their children's education.
Women are certainly key to this election, and polls seem to suggest some women heading in Ms. Nunn's direction, and one might wonder whether the Pillowtex commercial with women who worked for decades there who said you left with your $1.7 million and left them holding the bag empty, or the Dollar General manager who says that she wasn't treated fairly in her estimation because she's a woman. Talk to those women in particular and to the women who may have been persuaded by them, Mr. Perdue.
Well, look, Pillowtex had been in bankruptcy for years. And I'll say the same thing I said then. It's a tragedy of national proportion. It was created by our federal government, however, not one individual. I was there about 8 months. It's a tragedy. Those are the best workers I've ever worked with in the world. And yet, because of bad government policies, entire industries, apparel, textile, footwear, electronics, even furniture, have been decimated by these bad government policies. That's what I've been trying to bring into the dialogue in this entire race. I believe the way out of this is to get our economy growing again. It seems to me that if you look at Dollar General as an example, there was no wrongdoing there. That lawsuit or that claim or that complaint was settled 5 years after I was left, and she knows that, and it was less than 2,000 people. We had upwards of 70,000 employees in that company. But ask her about her two complaints, her two employment discrimination complaints that she will not disclose to the public. All of my record is public. Hers is not, and she won't disclose it.
Ms. Nunn, your ads do say that women can't trust David Perdue. Is that how you feel?
Well, I'd like her to answer my question.
We can answer both if you don't mind.
I'd be happy to do both. First of all, I think that these women that are featured in the ads are employees that worked for you. So they are telling their own experience in their own words. And, 2,000 women, that actually seems like quite a lot to me, who say that they were discriminated against. And federal investigators, it's public knowledge, found that that was true. And it was during your tenure. It was settled afterwards, but the suit was during your tenure. So that's, I think, very, very clear. I'm happy to talk about what you try and create an equivalency here. Again, there has never been, and you know this as well, because it would be public record, there's never been any EEOC findings about any organization that I've ever run. That's very different from your record. Again, at Dollar General, and then look at Pillowtex. You say that it was governmental policies. That was during George W. Bush's presidency. Are you really saying that George W. Bush was somehow responsible for your presiding over Pillowtex?
Okay.
I need a response on that, please.
Take 15 seconds, please, and then we have time for one last question. Go
Well,
ahead.
she still didn't answer the question. Why, if that's the case, why won't she disclose the details of those two complaints?
There's nothing to disclose, as I said. Again, the EEOC and the federal investigators found nothing ever with points of light, and it's public, and you know that, and you all have put a public information request in.
Well, no, it's not public.
It's
not.
public
You've said that
information
before.
if
It's
the
not public.
EEOC had any findings.
The details of those complaints are not public. This is the second time you've told voters of Georgia that that's public, and it's not public.
It can be accessed publicly if there was any finding, and you know that there was not. So therefore, there's nothing to reveal.
You're not telling us the details of that complaint. Those two people deserve to have this aired.
So, David, trying to create equivalency here is really a stretch.
All right. Thank you both. We'll leave it right there. That is all the time we have, in fact, for questions. The candidates will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. By random selection, Michelle Nunn makes the first closing statement.
Great. Thank you. So first of all, thank you all very much for brave moderating and panelist questions, and to GPB and to the Atlanta Press Club for this great service that you all provide. And Amanda and David, thank you again for the opportunity to be together. Look forward to one more time. And, I got in this race to continue what I have tried to do for 26 years, to try and make a difference in people's lives by working together and solving problems. And I believe that that's what we need more of in Washington, a collaborative spirit, looking for common ground, and again, bipartisanship. I believe we can tackle important issues. We can raise the minimum wage for individuals and families. We can actually create an affordable pathway to college for students, and we can tackle our long-term debt if we work together. So I bring a spirit of service to all of Georgians. I hope that you will join with me in working together to live out our Georgia State motto values: wisdom and justice and moderation. And I ask for your vote.
David Perdue, your turn to give your closing remarks.
Thank you. During this campaign, I've traveled all over our great state, talking with hardworking Georgians and listening to their concerns. One message is very clear. Washington is broken, and it's affecting your lives and your family's lives. Like you, I believe our country's headed in the wrong direction. I believe we have to turn that around right now. Enough with dysfunction. Enough with lack of accountability. I'm tired of going from one crisis to another and a lack of leadership from the White House. I want to be your voice in the Senate, to take up your side in Congress and get Washington working for you and your families again. President Obama wants Michelle Nunn in the Senate to fight for her. I want to go to the Senate to fight for you. I'm asking for your vote and your trust to be your next United States Senator. Thank you.
Amanda Swafford, your turn.
Thank you to everyone at home who's taking the opportunity and time out of your evening to listen to these debates. I know that politics sometimes is not the most enjoyable thing to listen to, but it's so important to get involved and to be engaged. And I know it's a rough and tumble business. I've been called selfish for being in this race, but I'm taking personal responsibility. I could be doing a lot of different things this whole year instead of going across the state and trying to champion the true liberty ideas of individual responsibility. But it's so important that we stay engaged in this race and really look to individuals and the power and responsibility of true liberty, because that's where it lies, not with big government. If you are not connected to the right people, or your industry does not have the right lobbyist, you're at a supreme disadvantage in this regulatory environment. And that's what I'm standing up for. I'm standing up for you being able to make your own decisions and not always looking to big government to solve your problems. So I encourage you to please understand that the power and responsibility is where it lies.
Amanda Swafford, thank you very much. And thanks to all three of you for being here tonight. I know I speak for everyone in the room and watching at home when I say we appreciate your willingness to serve our country. Thank you again for being here. And that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind all voters that the general election will be held Tuesday, November 4th, and early voting is already underway here in Georgia. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists as well. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging this debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club and all of the debates they're hosting this election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there. You can see it anytime. The debate will also be available on demand at gpb.org. The Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series is made possible by a generous donation from R. Charles Loudermilk. Please stay with GPB tonight for Masterpiece Classic, The Paradise. I'm Russ Spencer. Thanks for joining us tonight, and be sure to vote.
This is a GPB original production.